All right, there's no easy way to talk about this movie without talking about spoilers. So I'm going to go all in. I'm just going to talk about spoilers, things I like, things I didn't like. And if you haven't seen the movie, go see it. You could do a lot worse. But so much of what I enjoyed and did not enjoy are so directly connected to plot elements, it would be disingenuous and almost impossible to talk around them in a way that wouldn't tip my hand to what the spoilers are. Or and if you've been on the internet, you probably know everything, but I just want to give you, heads up. I will be discussing spoilers. So you've been warned. All right, the first thing that really bothered me, I don't think this movie ever justified why we have MJ and Ned back in the movie, right? We're seeing the trailers. We know they're coming back. And I know Sony's not going to be stupid enough to, not have Tom Holland and Zendaya in the same movie, because that's just a license to print money. And I get that. And people are showing up for the two of them. The woman sitting in the seat next to me, that's what she was there for. She wasn't there for Spider-Man. She was there for Tom Holland and Zendaya. And she was very vocal about it, too, I might add. Not enough to ruin the movie, but part of me was like, calm down, lady. But I don't think they do a good enough job justifying why they're in the movie. One of the plot threads that they're trying to establish is just how lonely and isolated, Peter Parker feels. But it doesn't work when it's all covered in a montage, and then 20 minutes into the movie, his friends are back. Yeah, they don't remember him. We don't get to live in the isolation that Peter feels for very long, and I think that's a missed opportunity, especially because they try so hard to kind of emotionally manipulate you into believing that he's been so alone for so long. It just doesn't work because we didn't get to experience it. I think, and I'm always being accused of you're trying to fix things, or you want to do this or do that. You got to, play in the sandbox that they have, which is true, but you miss an opportunity to have an individual Spider-Man film, completely isolated from his friends, from everything he knows. Everybody online was saying this would have been a perfect time to bring in, Felicia, the Black Cat. I agree 100%. He's feeling lonely. He's feeling vulnerable. And you just have Black Cat come in. She's such a manipulator. She's such a seductress. And to be honest, they almost went that route with Yelena, whose cameo is absolutely terrible. Just garbage. I hate her accent. But she makes him meet her in a bathhouse. And I was like, oh, maybe she's going to be a little bit of a seductress, right? She is like a widow. And you don't have to introduce a new character in that regard. You could have Yelena almost do the femme fatale thing. And I thought they maybe would try something there. They don't. They don't. It was just such a waste of time. And she doesn't even really point him in any direction that is necessary. All of the plot information she gives, her stupid little expositions, they could have come very naturally from someone else. You could have had, and if you've, like I said, it's all spoilers, Jean Grey's looking for something called VMAX, right? Just have a mind-controlled character mention VMAX. It doesn't need to be Yelena in a bathhouse. It's so stupid. I hated it. But, again, Spider-Man's lonely. He's in isolation. Perfect time to introduce a femme fatale. I was saying to my father, there's some irony here that Tom Holland played Nathan Drake. They should have just ripped off the Uncharted thing, where in Uncharted 2, he's running around with Chloe, right? You should have introduced a character like Black Cat. They should have been most of this movie together, right? Maybe introduce MJ and Ned at the end, because like I said, Sony's got to have their Tom Holland and Zendaya, otherwise people are going to riot. But have him, with Felicia. Have him with her. And now he's being oh my God, that's the love of my life. And you could have had, remember that scene in, if you never played Uncharted 2, there's a part where Chloe goes, Nate, dance with the one who brought you. And I think something like that would have really worked here. Plus, then if, he ends up with MJ, there was some struggle to it. The trailer shows she has a boyfriend. That dude's in that one scene. That's it. If you've seen the trailer, that's him. He's out. So it's not even I don't even know what we're supposed to be rooting for here. Netflix has an entire genre of star-crossed lovers on ranches and in small towns. Just rip something like that. We need a love triangle, for God's sake. You need something, some kind of tension. And instead what we get is what we already had with Gamora with Guardians of the Galaxy, where Gamora, she dies, and then they pull in this one from an alternate reality or the timeline, and she's like, I'm not the Gamora you remember, Peter. I don't love you. Well, MJ essentially says the same thing. I'm not the MJ you remember. I don't have memories of you. I don't love you. And it's seen it. But Spider-Man's a much larger audience than Guardians of the Galaxy, so I suppose I can forgive it a little bit. But if you've been watching all these movies, There's really nothing new under the sun here, right? The movie itself really doesn't know quite what to do with a few of the good ideas they have. Let's talk about his mutation. It is played up in the trailers. And I know, myself included, like myself and my friends, we're like, oh, we're getting Man-Spider, or some approximation of Man-Spider. They brought in the Hulk. Hulk's famous for turning into a monster. Thematically, Spider-Man's going to turn into a monster. You know, this could be really cool. No, they don't do anything with it. As a matter of fact, it's so frustrating because what he does is he talks to Banner about the inhibitor, so he can create like a universal power inhibitor to suppress mutations, right? Essentially, or like RNA and stuff like that. And my dad and I are like, oh, well, they're just going to use it to suppress the X-Men because everybody knows they're trying to put the X-Men together. And everybody knows it's Jean Grey, right? Spider-Man somehow stumbled into an X-Men plot, which I'm fine with, to be honest. But it is very much it feels very much like an X-Men movie, especially with them trying to like manipulate, weaponize, and suppress powers. So it's fine. Jean Grey is again kind of like a weird plot point in this, simply because she's very vigilante, right? She's not very heroic. She's throwing people off buildings. She makes a guy walk into oncoming traffic and get smoked by a car, which is like, oh my God, her hero redemption journey's it's got to be something. It's got to be something else. But she's villainous and she's murderous. And like I said, it's, you know, it's funny because I'm thinking about it now. She has the bad guy at the end of the movie dead to rights. Why doesn't she just kill him? Why doesn't she just kill him? You know, she made that one guy. She makes MJ jump off a goddamn building. She makes a guy walk into oncoming traffic. But now she's got the chance to kill this dude and doesn't do it. Terrible. Should have just killed him. Would have been something. And then you can put her in jail, right? Or some kind of containment facility. And then just have them say something like she's being remanded to the custody of Charles Xavier. You don't even have to do anything. Like, you don't have to have an actor cast. You don't even need to show anything. Just have somebody say she's being remanded to the custody of Charles Xavier. Perfect. Now she's going to rehabilitate with Charles. Excellent. Instead, they just let her go? The amount of damage she's caused, the amount of destruction, chaos, and possible death she's caused, it is not heroic to let her go. Punisher had the right plan. Based on her threat level, put her down, right? Which I loved. I loved that the Punisher set up a sniper rifle and took the shot on Jean Grey. I love that Spider-Man's Spidey sense snapped him out of their psychic mind link, and he was able to take the bullet for her. I really enjoyed that. That was one of my favorite scenes. But I hated the sequence when they're in his mind, and you had Aunt May giving this speech, which is a speech for Jean Grey, mind you. It's not a speech about Spider-Man. We already have footage of them having Aunt May give him Spider-Man speeches. But this one is all about people will try and use your power. What? You've never had that conversation with Peter. That's a speech that you're giving specifically for Jean Grey to hear, and I hated it. They should have just had the memories from No Way Home. She's already given Peter speeches about these things. She's already done it. We have the footage. And then you could have, like, I don't know. It's a movie. You could have, like, Tom Holland and Jean Grey, or Peter and Jean Grey. You know, like what they would do on, like, Star Trek or something like that. Like, just composite it in the back. And she's like, oh, my God, I understand you a lot better now. You're right. One of those things. Not this speech about people trying to use your powers and we love you because you're you and you're special and all this affirming garbage that, quite honestly, like I said, it's a speech for Jean Grey. It's not a speech for Peter Parker. I hated that. You know what else? The movie's a little too busy. You know, I don't think the hand was completely necessary, and I don't think they were utilized very well. I saw that everybody thought that, like, Daredevil was going to be in this, so there'd be, like, a cameo or something like that, especially because we know we were getting the Punisher. Daredevil's already cameoed in Spider-Man. They're fighting the Hand. The Hand are regulated to goons. They're just hired goons. Yeah, the Department of Damage Control, the guy says, oh, I just realized there were just a bunch of lost kids and stuff like that, and like they just needed leadership or something like that. And it was terrible. It was terrible. You can explain the fight at the end because they're in the facility that they're sending people for some whatever reason, right? They could have already been in the detention facility. You could have had a bunch of villains in the detention facility. You could have had Jean Grey just release them. And of course they'd want vengeance on Spider-Man if Spider-Man took them down. It's just them being like security. It's so lame. It is so lame to the point. It's like, why even do this? You know, if they don't serve a narrative point, shouldn't really be in it. Even the Hulk had a little bit more of a narrative point because, again, like we're talking about, Mutant suppression, suppressing the genes. It works. Banner's got the inhibitor. That's what sets him in the direction. Tom Holland's Spider-Man never gets the Man-Spider option, though. He just becomes stronger, and now he doesn't need web casing fluids. It's fine, I guess. You can't have him be static the whole time, but I would have liked a little bit more of the monster. Scorpion is wild because the whole idea that Jean Grey had was like, oh, I'll just mind control Scorpion into getting my information. Dude, you just mind controlled the beginning of the movie. She mind controls like a janitor for the Department of Damage Control. If you already have access to someone who can get into facilities, why aren't you just mind reading everybody? Why aren't you just hopping around that office until you get the information you need? Your powers are so ridiculous. Why does it take you 37 steps to do this? When, okay, I'm into the janitor, walk by the office, jump into the guy, problem solved, right? They try to put limitations on it, but they don't think about it logically. Should have been real easy, but the movie needs to happen, so there you have it. Just doesn't make a lot of narrative sense based on her power scaling. And then she gets real powerful at the end, which, again, as I discussed, is why Frank, takes the shot. Now, speaking of Frank shooting Peter, I am okay with Frank Castle being really upset that he shot like a young boy, like a kid, essentially, right? I get that bugs him. He brings him into the hospital, and Frank Castle can just sit in the waiting room? He can sit by Peter's bedside? Is he no longer a vigilante? Is he no longer wanted by the law? Like, this is Frank Castle, the Punisher, who, by the way, bold for the Punisher to be driving around in broad daylight, even more bold for him to walk into a hospital. It just doesn't make sense. Are they not going to arrest him? How is Peter just allowed to be in a hospital room with the Punisher without a security force around him? So then, like, when Frank's like, I know how we'll get you out of the hospital, he puts on the mask and the gloves and he does like, hey, everybody, New York, it's me, Spider-Man. And he just gets to walk out. That's not how any of this works. That was so stupid. I leaned over to my dad. I'm like, I guess the Punisher's not a criminal in this. What is happening? Like, how do you let the guy who everybody knows is Spider-Man just walk out the door? Like, it was terrible. Absolutely terrible. I would have avoided that whole hospital sequence. I get that everybody was trying to show like New York loves its Spider-Man, but there are other ways to do it. I mean, there are other ways to do it. Like when they did it with in the Sam Raimi one where they hand him the mask back. That was fantastic. Something like that, something smaller, limited numbers. Hospital's not the sequence for you. I don't want to make it sound like I completely dislike this movie. I did enjoy it, but it needs to be tightened up. These things, like, the more we're going to think about them, the more it's kind of like going to break the movie for us. I don't think it's going to do it as bad as like when we discussed Superman and we were talking about all the Superman stuff, but there's a lot to this movie that needs fixing, or at least needed somebody in the room to say, yeah, but why, right? Or, okay, but if this happens, then this happens, right? Cause and effect. I just think a little bit of a tighter script, another pass at it. Don't have MJ and Ned. They don't really serve much of a narrative purpose. I don't think so. Not to the impact the movie wanted me to believe anyway. Because I'm convinced the only reason that they have them in here is for when you see in the trailer where he's like, MJ, you got to come with me, you're in danger. And then they go off to a rooftop and he kind of explains things and they have like this kiss and she's like, oh my God, Peter, it's you. And he's like, oh, I'm so happy. And then it turns out it's Jean Grey just fucking with him. Like, it was brutal, right? The woman next to me was like, I'm going to throw something at the screen. I'm like, calm down, lady. But it's like, it's the only reason there is so they could do like that kind of stuff, which again, would have worked if it weren't for the fact that we have seen so much of them already. If this had been if that had been the introduction scene to MJ, right? Implying he knows where she is anyway. Like I said, it would have worked in a different movie probably. Implying he already knows her life's threatened, he goes to get her. If this had been their first scene together, that would have been absolutely gut-wrenching. But because we already had so much time with them as was, I'm not as impressed. I'm just not. I didn't really fall for it. There was nothing, we've already established like the villain's power levels, and so you knew it. Nobody was really shocked except for the woman next to me. I did, however, as much as I'm complaining about like Ned and MJ being in the movie, I did really like the very end of the movie where he introduces himself to Ned and they do the handshake and then Ned looks up at him and goes, Peter. I thought it was so cool. I thought it's a nice win. Very optimistic moving forward. Loved it. my father was saying, I'm not sure if he remembers Peter or if he just put the pieces to the puzzle because MJ yells, Peter, be safe or be careful. And I don't know if he figured out based on context clues that Peter is the Spider-Man, because Ned does say that he's having, he's like, we must have known who Spider-Man was. It's not a coincidence that he was saving us. And they were saying like their brains are scrambled. They can't remember everything. As a matter of fact, when Jean Grey was in control of Michelle Jones, sorry. She's like, wow, she really doesn't remember you. There's nothing up here. So that I found interesting. It would have been nice too if they had seen like a yearbook or something like that and they're looking at Peter's face and it's like all static or something, just something that makes it, they're a little more aware that something's wrong, as opposed to being like, we must have known him. Why can't we remember? Why can't we remember? It was fine for what it was, for what it needed to do. I don't need to get into the complete details of how magic works in this, but just one more thing to show that it's like, oh, here's our yearbook. Who is that guy? Why can't we see him? Why can't we read this kind of thing? Just something that would have just put it over the top and really put a bow on it. It's like cinched it up nice. I kind of like the Tom Holland Spider-Mans, I don't mind them. This one I think was the closest to being like, oh, like it's like good, but, or like, okay, but if, like just do a little more, tighten this up. And I think we really would have had something quite spectacular. As a launching point for the X-Men, questionably weak. I don't really see the need for it. As a Spider-Man movie, like I said, I would have preferred not to have Ned and MJ. I would have preferred to follow that Uncharted kind of storytelling. These are just kind of some of the things that my father and I were discussing on the car ride home. Figured I'd get on here, talk about them a little bit. Hopefully my brother listens to it so he has a couple witty rejoinders when we go to do a Decadent. Anyways, that's just me. What do you guys think? Let me know. And to quote Chris Sabicki, I'll see you on the flippy flop.